try and do today is go a little bit deeper than we went in week 8. I mean, last week, just to recap, I do encourage you, if you haven't looked at week 8 yet, to do that, to go back and have a look, because it's a fairly important recap, because we introduced you to Russell Stannard last week, and Russell says in as many, in as few words as anybody I know, really what we need to do for assessment task number 2. So, and I actually broke up a video of his, about a 12 or 15-minute video, into small sections which related directly to assessment task 2. So we're going to talk to those this week. We're not going to revisit them. We're just going to talk to them, include them, and point them more towards what we need to do in week 9. So ideally, we've gone 1 week further down the evolutionary curve. We are 3 weeks away from the end of the course. And of course, the final week, there's no new content. It's really just polish and shine and gloss up your submission. So, there's really actually 2 weeks left. So, and those 2 weeks, I mean, there's no secrets. There's nothing new in it. It's pretty express what the 2 weeks will hold. So let's get started and have a look at how it all links together. Now, I talked this morning in the video this morning that I've posted 2 this week. I posted just the 1 last week, and we had a Zoom session which I didn't post, but we went over in some detail some of the issues we covered in the morning session. So today what I'm going to do is actually, I will record this and post it, so there'll be a Zoom and a content this week. But we go back to the role of the teacher, and that's what assessment task 2 is all about. What you as a teacher is going to do. Now, I do want you to stop and interrupt me at any given point in time. Okay, this is your session, so I have some idea of what I'll cover, but I really want to be driven by you. So we're going to talk about how you can use assessment task 2, and what assessment task 2 is essentially about. So it's about exploring and discovery learning. So it's some of these principles, how we can beef up pedagogy to include exploration options. And so when we look at that, for instance, here are the 4 things we wanted to achieve: knowledge creation and sharing, the topics collaborative learning, collaboration, contribution, and authentic assessment. So we've been building up to this. We've been talking about it for weeks. I've been banging on about it since week 1 with my contributory student model. So you're contributing towards creating a hypothetical learning environment, converting it from hypothetical into a real learning environment, and by occupying the territory. Now, ICTs are really good at occupying territory. They're good at breaking down boundaries. They're really good for introverted students because, the classroom and group work belongs to the extrovert. We know that from Myers-Briggs analysis. We know it from Jungian psychological theory. But what we're talking about here is using ICTs to convert the classroom, and this is why Russell Stannard is so useful to us at this point in time. He talks about flipping the classroom. Now, if we're going to get the maximum time or the maximum impact, the bang for our teaching buck, then it means we're going to need to work in that zone of proximal development with as many students as we can in the limited time we've got. Russell Stannard talks about stripping the classroom of some teaching tasks so that we can create space for more. And he says that technology is a great way of stripping the classroom of tasks that can be done in an instructional and more didactic way. Now, these are words that we've been using all term. So we're going to have a look at today how that relates to you in assessment task 2. So we're talking about the major shift here. Instruction from an instructionist format through to a collaborative and constructivist format where students are becoming co-designers. So, and implicated in that, of course, is what we talked about last week with Russell Stannard and also with Nathaniel Bock. We talked about network technology and web environments, how they basically open the world up and encourage and enable that kind of shift. Now, we don't all want to be high-tech technology users. Some of us will love it and take to it like ducks to water. Some of our subjects will lend themselves to that. Others will not. What we're talking about here is flipping the classroom so that technology creates the best learning conditions, the deeper pedagogies. It adds the most SAMR impact. We can transform and redefine learning by clearing the classroom space, decluttering it, so that we can create really, really good, useful time. So Stannard says online learning or ICTs and digital pedagogy is just as much about improving face-to-face teaching as it is improving teaching and learning through technology. And so when you're looking at assessment task 2, don't think it's just about including new technologies. It's actually about what value those technologies add to other aspects of your teaching. Let's go on and have a look at that. Any questions about that at this point in time? Right. Selena, did you have something you wanted to say?
No, that's all right. I'll just drop the connection. That's all right.
That's all right. No problems. Okay, so assessment task 2. I'm not going to go through this in fine-tooth detail because it's been up there last week and it's also in the content lecture for this week too. And Selena, we might just get you to mute if you would. Thank you. But what we're trying to do here is compile a repertoire. In week 6, we came up with a plan of what we'd like to do, a map, based on the generic capabilities. Now, that was really vague, and, you know, I understand your pain, and I know it was a painful thing to do. We've actually taken a little bit of time to unpack that for you, and Wendy gave you a model this week. I'll talk about that today too. But you're looking for lesson plans, unit plans, ideas, even digital tools. What you're going to do is create a portfolio. That portfolio is basically going to be, as we now know it, a Scoopit collection. That Scoopit collection is going to be a random collection of resources related to your topic area, your teaching area. So in our class, in our distance group of 40 students, there's going to be 5 or 6 of you who'll do English and history, 5 or 6 who'll do technology and design, some will do mathematics, some will do HPE. But for everything you create, every Scoopit item you curate, and curate means you add an insight as to how you would use it in your small unit. Okay? Now this is content creation. You're actually taking what is essentially an asset and you're converting it, repurposing it into course content, into something you can use. So all of your curated artifacts are going to sit in Scoopit with your insight. You're then going to create through Twitter or some other form, you are going to create what we call a learning circle, a PLN. And that PLN or learning circle is going to share insights about your curators' comments. In other words, they're going to share feedback. And the aim is to have that done roughly by week 9. So it's important because part of that, of course, the assessment is evidence. Evidence in your assessment task 2 that you've been part of a learning network and that you've actually used your learning circle for the purposes of fine-tuning your mini unit. Okay. Now, I don't expect to see you putting slabs of quote in there. You know, this is not a Nazi-style exercise. We're not expecting to see you point to people and say, "This is what I said. This is what they said." All we need you to do is hyperlink. So, if Phoebe's given you a contribution to, and we saw an excellent one from Phoebe to John today or yesterday, all John need to do is hyperlink that. And then that will come up in his document and I'll be able to actually enjoy that live experience of one student linking to another and giving that feedback. So we don't want verbatim quotes as evidence, we just want hyperlinks. And that's why you need to be using each other's Scoopit and actually feeding back and giving comments in Weebly, etc. So that's our task essentially, okay? Now we've looked at some really good examples this week. People are at various stages of where they're at, for instance, and we've got John's. We're going to talk about John's a little bit later today, but he's got his mini unit, and in it he identifies his little task here. And you know, I'm not making an example of John here. What we're doing is we're just taking his idea because it's up there, and I really want to encourage people to work with with students who are up and running, who are getting things done. So we'll come back to John shortly. Okay, Jesse Hutchinson's a real quiet achiever. He's doing maths and HPE. His Scoopit's looking really dynamic at the moment. If you haven't been in there and have a look, please do. Selena, yours is looking fantastic. However, what we do need is we do need some people to get in there and give you some PLN feedback now. Okay, we need some feedback from your network because you need to get evidence about what people think are good resources and you know how your curator's insight may map onto that resource and how people may want to suggest how it could be improved, developed, etc. Phoebe is looking fantastic, okay? If you haven't looked at one yet, you can see there she's had 23 views, probably more by now. I looked this morning, but she's got some great ideas and is very forthcoming in terms of sharing. So if you're in the same area as Phoebe, make sure you get along and have a look. Justin Moore's doing very well too. Okay, his scoop that's really moving along, and Paul is doing history and maths. So again, could use some feedback from the community. Now, I point those students out to you, for instance, purely because they're doing some really good things. Now, if we look at the sorts of things that Phoebe's bringing up, we can see here that, there's her scoop it. Okay, it's looking quite dynamic. 24 views, one today. That must have been me, so it's been quiet today. You can see her areas are home, economics and English. And you see once you click on that, we can get in there, for instance, and we can see that what we've got here is a curated list of resources. Okay, and you can see there's, some quite nice, insightful additives there that people are going in. Some people are re-scooping, borrowing from her field of knowledge here and bringing it home to their own. If you do, please acknowledge and say why, leave a comment. That's really important because that's all evidence. That's all part of the nature of a learning network. That's exactly what we're looking for here, and that's exactly the sort of thing that you will include in your synopsis as you write up this particular piece of work. So this is the whole notion of flipping the classroom. These are resources that we think, we can disrupt a situation where a teacher walks in, stands at the top of the class, is the sage on the stage, introduces the topic, and then instructs students for the next 6 weeks through that topic. We're actually saying we're going to flip the class here. You may take some of these resources, post it to your students who will do it before they come into class. You may put up some articles, you may send them away, and by the time they arrive in your classroom 2 days later, ready to start a new mini unit, they've already done a lot of background work. That means that you can now start working face-to-face. You can start diversifying, differentiating. You can start doing all those important things that teachers do. Now, next slide. I'm going to use John's little example here. Reason being, because you can keep going back to it because it's live. So John decided to create a little mini unit in technology and design called How to Make a Boomerang, and he based it on a video on YouTube. He stored the video and scooted, and he made his curation, so he's looking good. Now, the whole purpose here is in your learning network, you may have a group of 3 or 4 of you. As I said last week, don't do this on your own. Don't create 15 resources and annotate and, get your group together. Each of you do 3 or 4, re-scoop from each other, add your insight, so then you can actually re-scoop the other person's insight, add to it, amend it, append it, acknowledge it, and that way you're all going forward. You've all got a starting point, a baseline that is so much higher than one person can create on their own. You've got 4 heads thinking as one, analysing as one, and piecing together a discussion as one. So John says, let's challenge the students to create a functional boomerang. That's their task. They're going to work in groups, so there's going to be a collaborative element there, and the judge is going to be an Indigenous Australian elder. Fabulous. So we can see here a range of constructivism happening. Create a functional boomerang, that's going to require some work in design skills and in the technology side. Working in groups, that's going to require some work on teacher mentoring, teacher support, classroom management. Judging, okay, the Australian Indigenous Elder is going to bring the socio-cultural perspective. So we've got a few different levels here of things happening. How will it happening? Look, notice John's got his sequence here, and he's got 3 phases. 1, research on how to make a boomerang. 2, the elder will come present something on the culture and protocols. And 3, once the boomerang is complete, the elder will be asked to score the students' boomerangs. Nice conception. Okay, the design and make the boomerang is one element of the task. The key element, though, is meeting and connecting with the Australian Indigenous people. Now, if that's so, then when we go back and look at John's pedagogical map, remember week 6 and 7, the things we've already done, in his pedagogical map, in there in cultural competencies, okay, or cultural capabilities, he will mention the appreciation of culture because he's bringing this out. He's bringing it out in his mini unit. So if it appears in his mini unit and it doesn't appear in his pedagogical map, then instantly I'll be sitting there scratching my head wondering where the hell this came from. Okay, so the important thing is in this task is to be consistent. Assessment task 2 is all about demonstrating how you go from a mapping exercise through to an execution. Now, and I don't mean killing somebody, I mean killing the task, where you deal with each of the separate parts of the task, and we'll come to those soon. So the issue John poses here, and he does this really well, I think, he just throws out to his learning network and says, how does technology bring students to a high knowledge from using it? Okay, so this is his sore point. He's got to make sure it's adding value, and not just using technology because technology can be used. Okay, it can also waste an awful lot of time. Russell Stannard talks about this. Don't use, toolishness is foolishness. Don't use technology that is going to waste class time. Do the students reflecting blog pages or should try to connect with people over the internet? Okay, an element of risk there, isn't there, connecting with people over the internet? I tend to think a managed and secure blog is the way to go, a wiki or a Weebly, and I think John will, he'll probably get feedback along those lines from his learning network. I'm swinging towards a reflective task, he says. However, this is a little bit unusual for an ITD class, given. I agree with you, John. Absolutely, it is unusual, and that's going to require a fair bit of co-constructivist work with you. So this is a really interesting task, this one, and I like it because it actually says to students, a boomerang, well, you're going to deconstruct your idea of a boomerang. It's not just a piece of machinery used as a weapon for killing animals or stunning birds. Okay, it's more than that. It's a socio-cultural artifact. So we're going to deconstruct it, then reconstruct it with all its socio-cultural attachments, turn it into an artifact which represents the distributed and the shared learning of these group of kids. So there is your SAMA. That's SAMA happening right there, going from weapon to the socio-cultural artifact, and it's being mediated by technology. Some ideas on how John could do that. Phoebe, came up with a great idea. Why not get the students to come back at you, John, and make a video of themselves? Perfect idea. So there you capture the repurposing, don't you? The redefinition. Here is the online video. Here is the socio-cultural learnings and sharing, this distribution of new thinking and thoughts. Here is my response to that. And here is how I will share that with people. So you're seeing the student become, a consumer of an online YouTube video on boomerang making to becoming a producer of their own video, which can be done using a piece of work called PresentMe, which is a piece of free screencast software. Has anybody used PresentMe?
Hello, Collins, Rodney. No, but I've used the Microsoft equivalent in one of my reflections.
Excellent. So you'd be pretty so you may prefer to use that then, Rodney, because it works just as well. And all it is just a simulcast split screen with a PowerPoint on one side or a document or a PDF file on another, you and your webcam and your voice talking to it. So it's really quite a simple thing. So you can record and pre-record lessons. So if you're coming to the end of a unit, you know that some kids will be wasting the next 2 or 3 lessons while the slower ones catch up. Why not have something pre-recorded? Why not say to students, okay, go to this, have a look at this. You can create then space for one-to-one teaching to bring those slow kids along, and also to free up the space for the faster kids to become self-determining and self-paced. You can post it to a virtual classroom. In this case, it'll be a blog, okay, because Education Queensland doesn't really support virtual classrooms. Okay, and if you do use one of the free ones, chances are it'll be blocked by the school when you try to use it. So blogs and wikis are probably much safer. Students can log in and watch things. You can supplement it with readings. You can post readings. You can also build mental models. This is a really good one, where you can, for instance, you can take a past exam question. Now, where are we going? Okay, some time ago, okay, last year when I taught this subject, here are 3 questions from the exam. Okay, so here are 3 things that we probably need to address. So when we start this unit, let's have these 3 things in mind, and you can build mental models about here's what knowledge I think you'll need by the time you finish. One I've seen done brilliantly before is A Tale of Two Teachers, where you record a mock debate between 2 teachers. And it could be an issue of history, it could be an interpretation of a text. It could be, for instance, something to do with related to sports or technique. Okay, but you get 2 different perspectives on a topic, you compare opinions and approaches, and the task for the kids is set. somewhere in between those two topics, as Buddha would say, is the middle line, is the middle pathway. And that's the pathway that the student is going to try and find. Giving feedback. This is a brilliant one. This is a form that I would like to probably introduce into assessment here at CQU, where we actually put up your piece of work and record a video and actually speak to your piece of work, talk to it, how you got your results, where you lost your marks, and bring, this supports what a Gyrus in 1974, 1994 and 1999 called double loop learning. So it actually helps you develop deeper learning. And ultimately too, with something like Present Me, students can become co-presenters. In a very short period of time, they could take the two teachers and they could do a critique of each of the teachers' perspectives in an online video and then present their own perspective, what they think is the truth. So, and that can be archived, and you can build a permanent repository and you can use it for teaching. Can they use their phones to record and Present Me for editing? Yeah, look, I think it's webcam based. Okay, John? I think it is webcam based. But it's worth looking. I mean, if you jump on Russell Stannard, and I do give a reference in a moment, he's got his 5-minute blogs. And Russell takes you through almost everything you need to know and points to where you can find out that information in 5 minutes. So I'll give you the hyperlink for that at the moment, but my understanding is it involves a webcam. But the video that you shoot, there's no reason why the video you shoot on your mobile phone can't simply be, if it's not an MP4 format, can't be saved to MP4 format and posted. So you get the same impact. Another task we had here is looking, particularly for John, and this is what brought this one to mind for me, is TED-Ed. Can I ask, is anyone using TED-Ed or have used it? Little bit of silence there. I mean, that's okay. Okay, Selena's no, good, yep. John, no. Now, this, I was actually really surprised not to see some items from, or some artifacts or tools coming from TED-Ed not appearing in your Scoopits, because TED-Ed is absolutely fantastic. Particularly those people doing, every topic you can imagine, there are thousands of resources in there. And look, probably the best thing to do is demonstrate, and I've actually got one up here already, Adolf Hitler, which is a very common topic. Now, but the reason I'll show you, I'm having trouble getting them across here. Okay, we might just link to it and see what happens. Come on, Adolf, he's always quite contrary, isn't he? There he is, he's popped up, excellent. Now, this is an example of TED-Ed, and as you can see, it's online lessons. Now, here is one lesson. There are thousands of them up there, and TED-Ed is actually broken down into curriculum areas, and it's also broken down into age-relevant areas as well. So you can search early years, you can search middle years, you can search junior years, you can search senior years. As you can see, this particular unit has had nearly 2.5 million views. And the nice thing about it is, it presents, you don't have to go looking for it, unlike Scoopit. I mean, you can embed this in Scoopit, sure. But it's a TED-Ed original, so the educational content is good. It's been developed by other teachers. This is a great video where, first of all, you watch the video, step 1. Step 2, you move into the think. Now, you don't even have to do this. This has been done by other teachers for you. And you can see what happens. Instantly, there are a series of pre-existing multiple choice and short answer questions there to get the students to begin to think about the content of the video. You can set those for homework. They may need to make notes. That way, when they come back in the class, you can check and see who's actually watched the video. You get into the dig deeper section, and you can see here that here is an annotated bibliography of the content behind this particular video. Additional resources to explore. In other words, let's grow your knowledge. You can go all the way back to Hitler's boyhood, information and resources on his political views, okay, everything you need to know. And ultimately, before you even start a unit, you can send them to a mediated discussion board. Now this is guided discussion. It means it's discussion led by a TED-Ed lesson creator. So in other words, it's had someone driving it. Okay, it's been a monitored site. There are also 15 open discussions which are less monitored or not formally monitored. But the reason why I present this is to show that to complete your task for assessment task 2, you only need to come up with some resources. You don't always need to create them. And this is a really interesting point. So TED-Ed is a great resource. And even once you get in there, it's so easy to build quizzes, do anything you want to do. You can create other learning content. You can even take existing units and you can, just modify them to suit your own content. And it enables you to create flipped learning content for your lessons very quickly based on any YouTube that you can find. It's totally shareable. It's as shareable as YouTube is. It's free, so students can also use it. And, as Phoebe suggests, here they go. They can actually make their own videos and give their own perspectives. They can do an interview, okay, with an elder and post it. But you can see that, it's roughly a very Bloom-like process. Watch, think, dig deeper, discuss. And at this point, students are in a position where they can jump in to a unit and have a look at your classroom now. Okay, let's assume you've got 65% of students who've actually done this and gone in. You'll have 35% who won't. Don't be deterred. Get them to sit down the minute they walk in, while the other 65 are working away on stuff with you, doing some really exciting learning. This 35 can be sat at another table, and they, that 35% can then start working their way through the videos. They'll do it once, they may do it twice, but they won't do it a third time because they'll soon realise where the learning's happening and how it's happening. So please do have a look at it. Phoebe's been there, that doesn't surprise me. And I think if you go there, you will find plenty of resources to add to your Scoop-It. And part of my message today is don't panic. I know some of you are hitting the panic button. The workload is high. The time pressures are high. You've got busy lives. I'm trying to give you some tips here on how to shorten that demand, how to take a little bit of pressure off. Anybody want to comment on that, on TED-Ed? Hopefully you're still online and haven't raced off to it. By all means, go there and have a good look. It's well worth a look. And please just interrupt at any particular time. It's really important that you do. Assessment task 2. Now, Wendy posted a sample today or yesterday. Just be cautious. It's an exemplar. So if you follow that word for word and item for item, I think you're going to finish up, in middle ground. Okay. Well, obviously, what we're looking for here is a touch of, your own individuality around it, your own sense of innovation, and you'll bring the innovation to it in the choice of ICTs that you make. So let's have a look at, at this particular task. What I'll do is I'll just bring across a live version of it. Even though I embedded that document, it doesn't actually play. So it's a bit of a problem. So when we look at the document here, you can see that here is task 1. We had this in week 6 and 7. You had to come up with your low-end pedagogy, your high-end pedagogy, and your ICT. So they're the 3 things that we need to include, and that's why I've coded them yellow. Your pedagogical map needs to include them. Down the left-hand column, the left-hand axis, okay, you've got your 7 general capability statements. You then had to pick from those capability statements some that you thought were relevant to you, that you would like to include in a mini unit. Now, we know that John was going to do the boomerang, and we know that John was going to have an Aboriginal elder involved in the assessment of that. So, when we get down to some of the competencies here, and we'll just scroll down and see where it is: personal and social capability, ethical understanding, intercultural understanding. John is going to need to have some of those in his plan. Okay, he's going to need to make comment because he is really talking about building a socio-culturally relevant artefact that is going to shift understandings away from issues of design and technology to Indigenous perspectives of design and technology, and in doing so, enriching the student's framework. Okay, so that's really what he's up to there. And some of the descriptors there, the ICT, use media to promote tremendous insight into cultures, identify. Okay, so now Phoebe's idea. Phoebe wrote back to John in one of her responses, suggesting to John that he actually consider getting the students to, to use video themselves, to produce their own video on how to make a boomerang, and in doing so to demonstrate their own cultural sensitivities and their new cultural learnings. So, there's a whole range of ways to do this. So I did speak about this document in our workshop this morning. Helen saying that the link isn't working for her. All right, Helen, what I'll do is I'll send it out to you directly after this. Failing that, it is in this morning's video, but you really want a copy of your own. But I will send it out to you. So what I'll do is post it to the forum and just post the document there so you can go there and retrieve it. So that way we'll know it will be there. But you can see, here is your curriculum map. Weeks 6 and 7, and you're expected to finish up with something like that. Now, how will I include this map in assessment? Good question. I'm going to look here for consistency. When you come up with your final sequence, I'm going to look here and see what your intent was. Did you achieve what you intended to achieve in your final sequence? So here you can get to be a bit of a time traveller. If your final unit looks nothing like your curriculum map here, go back and adjust your map. Often when you're a teacher, you start out saying, this is what I want to do, and you produce a unit, and it could be as a result of student ability, it could be school resourcing, it could be because it's a sports carnival. Whatever happens is going to affect you because this, the school culture is a disruptive one. So often you will have to amend your thinking. Lesson number 1, what you set out to do in your plan and your map may not be what you achieve at the end. So come back and just reflect on that. That could be a reflection that you post at the end. In the end, I found myself going back and revising my curriculum map. A, I bit off too much, more than I could chew. B, it was going to take too long. I actually conceived, a full unit, not a mini unit. Now, that's a really important point. I'll come to that in a minute. But, don't be frightened to come back and adjust your map so that your map lines up more accurately with your actual mini unit that you produce.
Colin, quick question with that. Does
yes.
Our map have to meet every point?
Every point that you raise?
No, sorry. Let me try again. So the boomerang project, will it meet every single point like creativity, literacy, numeracy?
Not necessarily, John. And here's where you'll be, throwing the furniture around. You'll be identifying in your sequence what you'll be doing and why. Okay, so even though you've done your curriculum map, here's a curriculum map. Here are, bits that I value in that curriculum map. Here are some low-end ways of delivering that. Here are some high-end ways of delivering that. And here are some ICT solutions. Once you've done that, you can then have a look at your mini unit, because let's face it, your boomerang unit, and I think you realise this yourself, is too big. It's going to have to be embedded within a larger unit where some of the aspects of what you're teaching there in terms of design and technology are going to be taught in another unit and then applied to boomerang making as a mini unit. Do you understand what I mean?
Not really, sorry.
Well, it may be working with wood. It may be the design. So, for instance, you may have taught the micro skills related to working with wood, for instance, and preparation. Then you may introduce boomerang making. So you already assume they're starting from a skill level, and now you're actually introducing a new dimension to that skill, where you're introducing, Indigenous perspectives on boomerang making, which contain a whole other range of competencies and a whole other range of ideas and concepts. So, and a lot of them socio-cultural. And as you said in your design, the Indigenous perspectives may actually add some really interesting design components too, some working with wood techniques that we wouldn't normally consider in our classrooms.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions or comments on that one? I just urge you not to take Wendy's exemplar literally. It's a structural guide. And for instance, when we get through it a little bit more, I'll just pull it back on. You can see how she goes through. Your curriculum map is there. That's part 1, week 6 and 7. You then go through and you do your scoop it reflection. And you nominate your scoop it account so we can go there and actually see there is one. And here's your digital curation. So you've picked your focus and you've explained why it's relevant. And you don't repeat your curator's insight, you hyperlink to it. Okay, and explains, but you do summarize it. You say it explains that the Gapminder resource can be used to support insight. And all I would do then is go to your hyperlinked curator's comment, and I would look and say, gee, you know, Grace Kelly's killed that. That's really good. That's brilliant, impressive. So after that, you then go through to your learning sequence, which was the next part. Okay, now, theoretically, we're not up to this yet. Okay, but once you've picked your topic and you've aligned your curator's insight and you've picked your focus, you're starting to design your mini unit. And this is what we call your learning sequence. Now, Wendy says you should use a phased sequence. And bear in mind, it's probably going to be embedded in a larger unit. It may be something on fashion and design in the 1920s. Okay, it may be a subcomponent of that. So, you know, it's really important to locate where your learning is in your curricula. And once you've defined that, to actually identify what the focus of that learning is and create a sequence. And the sequence you can see here is very much what the students are going to do. Phase 1, working with the students. They'll bring their toy to class. They will discuss. They will go into a ranking. Okay? There will be a wiki introduction. There will be group work. Okay? Insights will be provided and collected. Once they're collected, they will be mined and shared. Okay? Once that's done, you're moving on to phase 2. All right, now we're going to move into application. They're going to be allocated a country. For a brief global introduction to each country, projected via Google Earth, students are going to be asked what they need to know about that country in order to understand the children who live there. And then again, they're going to go on to phase 3, okay, where really they're looking here at the application now. Children create a multimodal presentation and report back to the group. They'll discuss the country most in need. A synchronous session with the community agency to develop deeper insight into the community. And they'll prepare questions, and the group then consolidate their learning, okay, by developing a good toy that can be manufactured or assembled by them, including here will be discussions of sustainability and ethics. Okay, and then, for instance, it could be linked to a class like John's, okay, where you're working with Year 9 working or textiles or a partner high school to actually produce some prototypes, okay, as a Year 9 assignment or a Year 9 task. So you can see here, this is a wish list, your sequence. So once you set up your sequence, you've got phase 1, what are students are doing? Phase 2, what's the application? Stage 3, okay, what's the realization? Once you've established that, okay, the next part you need to look at is the student narrative. I would actually change the next 2 parts around. I would put my ICT map in next, my ICT outline, because once you've got your sequence, for instance, I would, you know, say to myself, okay, well, what ICT would I use for that for phase 1? And I would break this into phases. Phase 1, I'm using a group wiki. That's my ICT. That's the only thing I'm using. Okay, I'm also going to use a polling tool like Kahoot. That's going to help the students to rank and determine things. Individual blogs where we can capture and summarize. Gapminder site, okay, they can use it as a research source. The internet, okay, is going to be used, for instance, perhaps at most stages of your project. Okay, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. I would break this down explicitly because mostly I think it's going to help you. If you look at your sequence and your sequence has got 3 phases, then I think attach your ICTs to each sequence. You're working in groups, okay, so if you're doing face-to-face group work, okay, online concept mapping is an option, okay. Really important to think about that. So link it. Once you've got your sequence, link it all if you can, please. Link your ICTs to your sequence because it's going to make it easier for you to do. And that brings us to your student reflection, okay, where you have to pull on your imaginative hat. You've been reflecting all term, and some people have struggled with the reflective component of this. But I do think it's important to walk in the shoes of other people when you're teaching with this technology, and imagine the sorts of difficulties that your learner is going to be experiencing. Because let's face it, this is one thing that online learning helps us do. It helps us identify issues that learners are having. It helps us differentiate very effectively if we pay attention to what's happening online. So it's always an if. But Lewis goes through and reflects on phase 1, what's happening at phase 1, on phase 2, what's happening at phase 2, and also what's happening at phase 3. So it's actually where we thought, oh no, this is such a messy assignment. When we look at it, once we reach and we've picked our topic and we've selected the focus of our mini unit and we start designing it, all we have to do is come up with a unit with 3 phases, and that's going to organise the rest of this task. It's going to organise the rest of the task for us, because we'll do our design using phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. We'll do our student reflection using phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. And we will embed our ICTs using phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. The only thing remaining then is for us to comment on our own experience, and I'm sorry if I'm making anyone dizzy scrolling through there, on professional networking and learning. And here we introduced, there's only 2 things you've got to relate your experience to. So this is not going to necessarily be a really long task. You've got EDSE standards 6.2 and 7.4. Go back to week 1 of the course, or week 2 I think it was. Have a look at what those standards are, remind yourself what they are, and your final reflection on professional networking and learning will address those standards. In other words, do professional networks, learning networks, in a busy course in the life of students, some of whom are part-time, under intense pressure and workload. Is it a realistic assumption that you will come together and form effective learning networks? Was Scoop It the best way to do things? If you can, link it to some of the blogs, some of the feedback, some of the evidence that you may have got in your Scoop It. Okay, or even some of your own personal experience. I mean, we know, for instance, you can do it statistically, a small table. You know, Scoop It produced 37 articles for me. Of these, you know, 3 made it through to my final Scoop It curated list. So its success conversion, you know, as a tool is about 10%. You know, and that's really good evidence. You can comment on that. You know, you can be your own research scientist here, and you can build your own framework. So when you're redesigning learning with digital technology, even though the task looks complex and tricky, in reality, it can be very structured. You can really take control of it. Now I'm going to pause there and open the space for anyone to ask a question. Would anybody like to comment at that point?
Yeah, Colin, it's Phoebe. This example that is being presented to us as exemplar, it's on like a document, but we're putting this on Weebly. Is that correct?
Actually, what you do is do it in a document and link it to Weebly. Just hyperlink, yeah.
So you're saying we set this in a Google document?
Yeah, either a Google document or even just a Word document.
That you can download, is that what you're...
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Yeah.
All right. So when you were saying about the phases and learning sequence, that's just breaking down our unit plan. That's the same thing, yeah? Absolutely,
Phoebe. That's all it is. It's the learning sequence is what you're going to do and what the students are going to do over what period of time.
So really all that we have left to do if you're up to date is breaking down the unit plan into 3 phases and then sort of doing a table with the ICT elements that link to the general capabilities and the unit lesson sequence. And then the reflection on the professional networking and learning and the narratives from the students.
From the student's perspective, yeah, at each phase of learning. So you're giving a really good synopsis, you know, an imaginative synopsis of what's going on from the learner's perspective.
The learner's perspective, we have to reflect on all 3 phases.
Yes.
Okay.
It's all learning.
Well, that makes sense. I mean, yeah.
Yeah. And this is, you know, this is why we're unpacking this task for you. I mean, just opening avenues, but the key is not to repeat everything you've done. And this is why a hyperlinked table is a really good way to do it. Do it as a Google Doc, no problems at all. It'll work just as well, but we can go through your document, and for each of those tasks, you can just hyperlink to your own Scoop It comments, to your own curated insights. You can hyperlink to any comments that other people have made to you in Weebly. So you can make it evidence rich without having to copy and reproduce any of those statements.
Hi Colin, it's Helen here.
Hi Helen.
I was just wondering, when you say a mini unit, are you thinking like a half a term's work, like a 5-week? Is that what time span would be?
Yeah, for me, 5 weeks would be at the upper level, Helen.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be thinking 3 to 4.
Okay,
Yeah.
Thank you.
And when you do that, I mean, embed the unit. Say, this is what's gone before, this is what will follow. So the students are entering this unit with, you know, the following understandings, the following capabilities, and they have done rehearsal of the following skills. So here's this, you know, skills profile, and then at the point this unit would take place.
Okay, yeah, because that's what I was kind of thinking of, doing something along using persuasive text as in for my English, but it would have to be definitely be, following or as part of a larger unit.
Yeah, exactly. So you're in control here. You can throw the furniture around, and you can say, look, in this imaginative world we call, digital pedagogies in secondary schools, in this imaginary world, we've already done this. So the students, the entry point is here.
Yep, thank you.
Colin, Rodney.
Rodney.
Looking at that exemplar, there's no referencing required, or are you expecting some referencing in our reflections, or?
Look, to be honest, your referencing probably will be primarily connecting to your Weebly's and your Scoopits and any cross-referencing you have in any of the forums that you're using. Probably in your professional networking learning reflection, you'll certainly want to reference standards, ASIL standards 6.2 and 7.4. So they're really the only two explicit things you've been asked to reference. But you will do a lot of what we call intertextual references of your own text. So for instance, you will often go back in time and say, as reflected in my pedagogical map, okay, you can see, for instance, the socio-cultural emphasis here, okay, in choosing this particular ICT. So you'll constantly be going back and forward in your own reflection, okay, back to your pedagogical map to point to what you've identified in that map and justify why it appears in your sequence. Now, you're not going to want to labour that to death, but when you get into sequence, for instance, we are going to use group work, okay, as a component, for instance, of critical creative thinking, okay, because what do we need to do? We need to support, okay, well, I'm making that up. I should make up a relevant example. Provide unique opportunities for unique solutions to be proposed with justified outcomes or justified reasons. So for that reason, of course, group work actually does facilitate better decision making, okay, and better problem solving. So creative and critical thinking, you would, in your learning sequence, you can go back to your curriculum, your pedagogical map, and say, yeah, the ICT here needs to pick up on the higher end focus here of problem solving by providing, collaborative access to decision making for everybody in the group. And hence, my reason, my use for this particular ICT and my justification for group work, So you will be, any referencing you're doing will be intertextual, that is, sorry, intertextual. No, I'm right, intratextual, which is referencing inside your own text. Okay, so you'll be going back to things you said earlier. Here is evidence of it. Here is the ICT I've chosen. Here is why I've chosen. Go back to my pedagogical map. Okay, so, and most of that should be apparent, but it's always good. I mean, the skill of a good student is to demonstrate your studentship, your studentness. And that means often when you produce a curriculum map, saying the bleeding obvious, saying to someone, look, I actually preempted this in my pedagogical map, and therefore, my mini unit actually reflects, several intentions outlined in my pedagogical map. Now, you don't have to go through and name everyone, but you can just put in brackets, i.e. group work, i.e. this, i.e. that. So that's the intertextual reference you'll be doing.
Thank you, Colin. Yeah, so you're not looking for referencing supporting course material, more so understand the general capabilities and co-authors.
Absolutely, and look, for instance, in Scoop It, I mean, we will be able to access any resource or artifact that you post there. If someone wants to use the Hitler video and unit, for instance, as an introduction, then that's going to be accessible via hyperlink from either Scoop It, where you store it, or from the ICT table that you produce, that you put down, and include TED-Ed as one of the ICTs you would use. You would outline the Hitler video and your curriculum rationale for doing that, your pedagogical intent. Any other questions? Let's skip along. Now, feel free just to throw them up as you come along, but bear in mind it's a mini unit. And I really want you to focus on that now. And if you're working together in a learning circle and you've produced, 3 or 4 curated artifacts each, you've got more than enough information there for a 3 to 4 week maximum unit, mini unit. You've got more than enough. It then becomes a question of making discerning decisions about what you want to include and what will be best in your best interest to include, and what's going to work best for the learner as well. So we're only asking you for one learner's perspective. We're not asking you to differentiate between learners. So your one learner in that reflection is probably going to talk about some of the, the pedagogical and the ICT experiences they had. And they're not going to be representative. They can't represent a whole class. They're only one person's perspective. So, you can be a little bit creative there. Okay? Because that's a strange one, throwing in, a learner's perspective. Because let's face it, in most classes you're going to have up to 30 learners. So, I mean, don't try to capture 30. What you're doing is just trying to imagine one person's response to that sequence, those 3 phases of learning that you've constructed, and how they've managed to go through that. So what have we done so far? Now, we're at various points here. Some people, I can see a comment there, John's kicking himself, he spent so long on the map. I'm hoping that time will pay you off, John. I really am, because that's time you spent in the trench. And once you've spent that much time in the trench, once you're out, the air just smells so much cleaner. It just tastes so much, and everything seems so much clearer. And that's why we put ourselves in trenches sometimes, just to make things clearer once you step out. So hopefully that's what you experience from this point forward. What we're supposed to have done, though, is the map. Week 6, we're supposed to have modified that map and made it our own in week 7 to find it. Okay, that's what we're supposed to have done. By week 8, we're supposed to have gotten on Twitter and Scoop It, and hopefully created a professional learning network. That professional learning network should be people engaged in our own curriculum tribes, so that we're working together, working as one, as a tribe, producing a set of resources, annotating those resources, curating those resources, and now, in week 9, selecting from those resources ones that we think we would use in a mini unit. A topic for our mini unit based on what we've seen from our curated resources. Weeks 10 to 12, we start to sit back and start to, we light up that post-coital cigarette. Here we are, we have our topic. We have an idea of what we're going to do in our mini unit, and 2 to 3 weeks is a nice mini unit. Every teacher should have a couple of mini units that size up their sleeve, because when it comes to the end of the year, you may finish, for instance, and reporting is due often 2 to 3 weeks before the end of the year, and you need a small unit, an interesting, fun unit to get you through to the end of the year. It could even happen in a term. Okay, so it's really important, mini units, and sometimes you really just want a unit where you can be doing a lot of skills, a lot of physical skills. It could be in the HPE field, it could be in tech and design, it could be ICT, where you've been doing a lot of teaching of skills and processes. So what you do is you implement a mini unit by way of summative assessment. You can actually test how well those skills are being applied. So a mini unit's really valuable. 2 to 3 weeks, I think, is a really good model. In a 2 to 3 week unit, you're probably talking about 12 to 15 lessons. Plenty. Plenty. Some of those make the assumption some are double lessons. It may open up more time for you. And think about how you'll tip the classroom in that period. What you'll do with ICTs to make the time you spend with students more effective. So you've selected your topic and you're working on sequences for your mini unit. Then you evaluate the ICTs you've explored, and that was weeks 1 to 6. Remember, you've explored a lot of ICTs. Any tools and sites of your choice, and create a table outlining which you're going to use, who will use it, its learning purpose, and why it's being done. And finally, the narrative or story from the perspective of one of your students as they engage in learning through progression of your learning tasks. What's their story? It's hypothetical, it's imagined, but you know enough about the technologies. Go back to weeks 1 to 6. Reflect on some of your own learnings there, and give those learnings a hypothetical name. Larry Jones, Martha Wainwright. Give it a name, and let those reflections speak. Okay, about the technologies that you've chosen to use, and some of the the shortfalls or some of the strengths, and some of the value in intent in using that. And that's what we still have to do. So any questions? Can I help anybody with a question they may have to move forward from this point? Is anybody feeling particularly stuck around anything? Not the sort of question we want to admit online, is it? But it's a good place to admit it, because let's face it, no one's died online here. It's a safe spot, and the aim is to get off here and go away and actually empower yourself to to plough through this in the next 3 weeks, and hopefully before the end of term to be sitting back, just rereading what you've done, rethinking what you've done, making a final few adjustments in week 12, and then just hitting that submit button.
Yeah, Colin, it's Rodney.
Fire away, Rodney.
I think the biggest problem that I'm thinking is the mini unit itself, because in my only prac that I've done, you've only got the students for 2 lessons a week at 70 minutes, so you're trying to find something that they can theoretically do in an 8-hour workday.
Right. Now, you may need to think, okay, what do I want to teach them now in, say, 3 weeks, where I've got them for a total of 140 minutes a week. So basically, I've got them for about 520 minutes over a 3-week period. Okay, so what will they enter my unit with? What skills, what capabilities have they got before they walk into my unit?
Yeah, that's what I'm having to, sorry to interrupt, that's what I'm having to think through now. I'm talking with Jonathan about this, where they're saying we've got to try and, because there's not many units you can do in manual arts from start to finish in 2 or 3 weeks of any great substance. So we'll have to certainly try and pull an element out of a larger unit.
Yeah, definitely. And the whole notion of doing something creative, something here where you can demonstrate the role of SAMO, where you're taking traditional teaching and you're flipping your classroom with technology in ways that lead to better outcomes. And so, you may finish up doing a classroom task the same way, but the technology may be used in the setup, where where John's using a YouTube video. He may finish, for instance, the final week, maybe where they actually trial their boomerangs. They video, get into pairs. They actually trial their boomerangs, and then they make their own video about making a boomerang, and go through the assessment period with the elder. I mean, that could be the final week. It's it's a case you're going to have to work out what point students enter your unit, and it's not easy, but but it is very creative. The aim is for you to think of something where these students can actually take traditional teaching, and you can use the technology to somehow redefine it. Now, a boomerang may finish up still being a boomerang, but the process, the redefinition of the process of creating that boomerang has been really, really deeply altered and enriched by the use of technology.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Anybody got anything they'd like to add before we wrap this up? Or John, did you manage to get your Weebly problem solved there? Because I did try to post. I actually wrote quite a long response to you this morning, and then looked around and I couldn't see a submit button anywhere. No,
I've had a few people try make comments. I don't know. Like, some people have been able to comment, but a lot of people haven't. So I've searched it and I've chucked it up on the forum there, hoping that somebody will
I saw,
the solution. But...
I saw Rodney had a response for you there about checking your settings, just in case something's been altered there.
Okay, cool. I'll jump in there and I'll have a look.
And that's a very good idea. Thanks for that, Rodney.
That's right. I've got all of about 2 weeks' experience in Weebly.
Welcome to the world of teaching. You know, you're the expert in everything, but you've got zero experience in anything. And I think, you know, the real challenge with teaching always was and always is to be humble in that position and to actually not pretend that you have all the answers, but to sit down beside someone, you know, to be the meddler in the middle. What do we know? What don't we know? Okay, how are we going to find it out? And, you know, and not suggest that, you know, by any chance that you actually know more than anybody, because, you know, but you can help certain people advance. But the reality is it's a case of it all advancing together. And this is that contributing student model. You know, a teacher can start out from a particular point, but as we saw young Nathaniel say last week, you know, school is where learning starts. It's not where it stops. And if we can be humble enough to embrace that, and I think with technology, we have no choice other than to embrace it, because with proprietary software coming out all the time, what you knew last week is now no longer current. The shelf life of knowledge doubles every 12 months now. So, you know, we are no longer really into storing knowledge. We're very much into learning processes. And, you know, so there's no such thing as an expert. And this is unfortunately the failing of teaching. For a long time we've been in a model where we've elevated ourselves as experts, and now we're having to unlearn that and come up with new pedagogies and new positions for ourselves in old institutions. So I won't preach too much more about that, but I share that with you. Even in universities that's happening, Rodney. So there's no such thing as an expert. I think there's an ABC blog, or is it a podcast called The Death of the Expert, and every week they feature a different perspective on why expertise is no longer relevant to our modern world. So I guess we're part of that. We're part of the modern world. If there's no other questions, I'll stop there, but I will just encourage you all, please, to jump on the forums and keep the emails rolling over. This is the critical time. You can stew away in a broth of your own making, or you can jump online and start to actually sort of say, I'm going to do some solutioning here. I'm going to try Colin first, and then I'm going to try other people in my tribe. And if that still doesn't work, then I'll try something else. You know, the key is to get busy, because, you know, certainly the more you throw it out there, the more heads are working on it, and, you know, the better the chances of a solution. There's no other comments. I want to thank some of the people in this course too. I mean, it's such an amorphous course, a shapeless course. Sometimes I wonder what we're going to talk about each week. And then I look at Phoebe's blog, I look at John's blog, I look at Rodney's work, Selena's, there's, you know, and we've got Justin emerging out of the woodwork now. We've got Jesse Hutchinson, and we've got people in there chipping away, you know, creating and writing and contributing, the contributing student model, growing this course as we go. So we're able to talk about this stuff only because you're doing it. That's the only reason we're able to do it. So I thank you all for that, you know, because you are contributing and making content. Otherwise, it's just theory on bits of paper.